coming, the sun's zooming in, meltdown expected, the wheat is good bid, engines stop running, but I have no fear, 'cause London is drowning. I live by the river.
Hello everybody and welcome to the By the Minute Arsenal podcast. We have a win to discuss, which is nice. It seems so long, but it wasn't the best ever win, but it's a win. But before we get into that, introduction as usual. I am Matt H. With me is Matt V. Hello, Matt.
Hello. I'm sorry for my abrupt exit last week. I promise I won't be rushing off this week.
Oh well, that's very good of you. We know you had other fish to fry or leeks to fry. Oh, hang on, I'm mixing metaphors there. That won't work. And we also have live. He was in Nottingham last week, and he's in Yorkshire this week. We have Pete. Hello, Pete.
Hello, Matt, and I'm much recovered this week too.
Oh yes, you were under the what's it last week, so I'm glad you're back and fighting fit. Right, let's get on with it then. Hull. Arsenal played Hull lunchtime on Saturday. It wasn't a classic, but it was a win, as I've alluded to. 2-0. Hull were not a bad team at all. They did sort of. They didn't look like a team who'd been struggling at the bottom. Their new manager is obviously making a significant difference, it seems. There's a lot of that about, of course. What's his name from Swansea was doing well against Leicester as well yesterday, Paul Clement. But sticking with the Arsenal Hull game, a win, 2-0. Just what we needed really after the week we'd had before. It would have been nice to have a 5-0 evisceration, but that didn't happen. But we'll take the 3 points. We'll go through some bits and pieces in a minute, but Matt, any particular thoughts that you'd like to note at this point?
I would think 2-0 sounds like a comfortable result, but for the last 20 minutes I was feeling many things. Comfortable probably wasn't one. We've spoken a lot about our first half performances. I don't think we were particularly bad in the first half. I don't think we were great either, but we did seem to have a lot of chances. I don't know if that was through us or through Hull creating a lot for us. But throughout, even if we looked decent going forward, that we looked pretty shaky defensively, and I always felt Hull posed a threat to us on the break. So I was quite pleased in the end that we managed to get the clean sheet.
Yeah, they had their moments, didn't they? The guy on the left, whose name I've forgotten again, the new Polish signing, Welski, I think.
Isn't he Grzycki?
I wrote his name down. I was doing this for By the Minute, and I wrote his name down a couple of times. And I now mine's gone blank, but he looked particularly useful down the side. I thought down the flank. I thought. Pete, sorry, did you have any initial thoughts on this one?
No, that was it. Other than I think his name was Grzycki, and because it was spelt like Rosicki but with a G.
Oh, well, there we go. Nice of you to bring up an old memory there as well. All right, well, let's look at the team news then. So essentially, it was the same 11 that started against Chelsea. Bellerin, therefore, was in, and obviously recovered from his bang, shall we say, like the week before. But so was Kieran Gibbs, which I was mildly surprised about. Any thoughts on that one? Let's start with Pete. Any thought on that?
No, I like to see Kieran Gibbs in the side. Nothing against the Nacho man, but I think it's quite nice to see him occasionally, and I thought he played reasonably well. And I think he probably was to some extent responsible for our first goal. As it was his shot on goal that led to it, wasn't it?
Beautiful segue. We'll jump to the goal then. Yeah, so the goal has been the subject of a little controversy, shall we say, because no one's denying this. It went in off Alexis Sanchez's hand. My first thought was it wasn't deliberate. It's far too quick to do anything about it, so it was a goal. There wasn't a problem with it. But that hasn't been the view of everyone. Matt, what did you think?
Yeah, I think the goal should have stood too, because I feel like so often in matches, and I think it happened in this one too, of a Walcott shot, you see the ball hit the hand of the defender, and everyone will say it hit him too quickly, he didn't have time to move his hand, he didn't mean it. So I think it's only fair that the same rules applied the other way around when it happens to the attacker. I don't think Sanchez deliberately hit it in with his hand, so I think it was probably right that the goal stood.
I like that. That makes very good sense. I know exactly the shot you mean. Yes, from Walcott when that happened. So it's interesting. There was a comparator, if you like, within the same game. Pete, any views on that particular incident?
Yeah, it seemed like a goal to me. As far as I know, if I'm not really entirely clear on the handball rules. I suppose we probably should be by now, shouldn't we? But surely anywhere on the pitch, if the ball hits your hand and it's not deliberate, you haven't moved your hand to stop the ball, then it's not a free kick, is it? So I didn't really understand why they were saying in the second half that Clattenburg had apologised to Hull. So you apologised for not ruling out a goal that should have stood. It didn't really make any sense to me.
To be honest, I should probably have looked into this more before we actually started this. I've got the rules somewhere. I could have had a look, but this kind of stuff should be sort of gut reaction to some extent, shouldn't it? And the fact is, there was no intent to gain an advantage by that contact with the hand. So yeah, I was a bit thrown by the Clattenburg apology that apparently happened at half-time to everyone to do with Hull, as far as I can tell. Yeah, well, but ultimately we don't care because we got the goal and that was what we needed. Hull didn't help themselves. Sorry, go on, Pete.
Well, I would only just echo, I think, something you were saying earlier, that, yeah, okay, it was a bit lucky, whatever, but we'd had 3 or 4 good chances earlier on in the game, and we should have taken at least 1 or 2 of them earlier, so it was kind of what we deserved, I think.
I think overall we did deserve to win the game. I was just going to say that Hull were interesting because they looked reasonably organised at the back, but they did look to shoot themselves in the foot occasionally. There was the odd sort of loose back pass and the odd sort of missed pass back to the keeper and things like that. And we didn't take advantage of those, and we really could have done. And it's a shame we didn't, although it didn't matter in the end. But there we are. Maybe it was just me. But yeah, Hull, as we've alluded to earlier, they looked pretty well organised, and so they did look dangerous. But we did okay. I think we defended okay without looking spectacular. A couple of good tackles from, was it Mustafi, I think, and Koscielny, I think. So we looked. I thought we were okay at the back, but without looking perhaps rock solid.
Yeah, I felt we were reasonably comfortable. I agree with Matt that it wasn't a comfortable watch particularly, but I think in general the team were pretty comfortable with it. There was one particularly good save from Cech in the second half, from Nias, was it, I think. But in general, Markovic was still running about making a nuisance of himself. But in general, I think we looked reasonably comfortable to keep a clean sheet, and particularly when Kieran Gibbs took out Markovic.
Yes. Now that's an interesting one, particularly given the events of the previous week. I, again, didn't see that remotely as being a what do they call it, dog-so denial of goal-scoring opportunity, because I thought it was way too far out from the penalty area for it to be an issue. Although, again, some of the pundits, some of the experts wouldn't necessarily have agreed with that. Matt, did you have any? Was your heart in your mouth for a second, or not?
I don't know why, but it just didn't look like a red card. I don't know, they changed the rules in the summer, and much like handball, I don't particularly know exactly what the rules are. But I think it was probably well played by Gibbs, because he took him out with what effectively probably would have been him through on goal, but he made it sort of look in a way where you didn't look at it straight away and think, oh, that should probably be a red card. I know the whole players protested, but it just looked to me like a yellow card, I think. It
looked clumsy, didn't it, rather than sort of dirty, if you like. Which I don't know if that was planned or not from Gibbs, but yeah, we'll take it. A couple of other random things I wanted to mention. It's never great. Those Saturday lunchtime kickoffs are never great, so it's good to get the result. It's good to get the win when it is that, and start the weekend nicely. We should mention, there was a couple of things I wanted to mention. One is obviously Walcott versus Maguire as a potential sort of catch-weight contest, because that just looked a bit ridiculous. Although I admired Walcott's passion. Pete, any thoughts on seeing Walcott in a boxing ring anytime soon?
Yeah, well, we always admire Theo's passion, don't we? And
it's too much coffee, that's what it is. It's back to the coffee again. All right, sorry, go on.
Yeah, we've never seen that before, so what can we say other than ooh?
It was funny. I thought it was just funny that it was up against Maguire, who is quite a unit, to use the popular phrase. He's a big lad. Let's zoom along then to the second goal. So we're deep into injury time, aren't we? And Lucas gets a red card for handling the ball on the line, and Sanchez steps up. Goal, all pretty straightforward. Any comments, Matt, on the second goal?
It wasn't a great penalty. I think he was probably saved by the fact the keeper was half expecting him to probably chip it down the middle again, which meant anywhere vaguely to the side was going to go in, but did what he needed to, and he did well once he'd gone round the keeper. A lot of people were probably going to try and shoot from there, but it was a great pass, and I don't think anybody can really argue about that being a penalty and a red card.
No, I don't think so. It was Lucas again involved, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was Lucas to Clucas.
Lucas to Clucas.
And Lucas does seem to have that, perhaps not golden touch, but sort of silver touch in really getting involved whenever he turns up in one thing or another.
Yeah, and it was a lovely ball in from Sanchez to him as well, wasn't it? He really picked him out nicely. And there he was, and a lovely little header that... Well, Clucas didn't really have any choice, did he? He either,
really.
To be honest, might as well have just let it go in rather than save himself missing a match. But there you go. He chose the way that meant that the goal wouldn't necessarily happen. So there you go.
There you go. The only other point I was going to make was again about Ozil again, which is a slight repeating ourselves from last week, repeating myself from last week. He again looked, I don't know what he wanted to describe it, off the boil, out of sorts. And in fact, this time it was actually commented on by the manager after the match, although I don't know if that was just out of the blue or in response to a particular question. We're probably going over old ground again, but Pete, did you think he was, cold, for want of a better word? I mean, I'm sure everyone was cold, but...
everyone was cold.
But, you know what I mean. He's frustrated, seems to be a good word for it, perhaps. There wasn't any effort there, but some of his stats are, again, not particularly impressive. He's around more like the 75% pass completion rate. Loose balls, not getting on the end of things, trying the wrong thing at the wrong time. Just didn't seem to be clicking. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, and his was one of the worst misses, wasn't it? Out of the three that we had, I think his was probably the worst. And on his left foot, fairly easy by his standards. And it wasn't a great game for him. But I think he's saving himself for Bayern.
Ah, well, that would be nice. Matt, any other thoughts at all on the game, Ozil or otherwise, for that matter?
In terms of otherwise, probably just Oxlade-Chamberlain, impressed by him again in centre mid. One of our best players against Chelsea, and he carried it through again against Hull. Defensively, he looks really solid, but he also has that turn of speed, which means he can break away and give us something else to our other midfield options. So obviously, there's decisions to be made about whether we risk him starting in midfield against Bayern, but considering we've sort of only really played him there out of necessity, I'd say it's worked quite well for us.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We'll come to Bayern just in a second and perhaps discuss those midfield options. We have a bit of a break now in the league, and we don't play again until, I think, the 4th of March, because our opponents for the week after the Cup are Southampton, and they're in the, whatever it's called, Carling Cup, it's not the Carling Cup, League Cup. So we get a break. I think that's quite handy that we have a little break from league action for a couple of weeks, as we've just sort of got back on the horse. I know I keep saying that, but we shouldn't keep falling off the horse. And we had perhaps a slight... I don't know, there was a bit of a boost, I thought, with the Chelsea and Spurs results this weekend as well. I'm not suggesting we're right back in the league title race, but Chelsea only drawing at Burnley and Spurs losing. It was to Liverpool, who are, of course, a rival for that sort of top 4 slot. But we'll go to Pete. Did you have any... Do you think this is a good time to have a little league break or not? Would you prefer carrying on?
I think it'll be very welcome to have a little break there for a while. It was a shame Liverpool didn't score 2 more goals, so we went above Tottenham.
Mm.
I mean, it was just
We could have scored 2 more, to be honest. That would have been nice.
That would have done the same job, I guess. Yeah, I think it will be quite useful after the Sutton game to have a little break and a chance to recharge. And well, we don't know what's going to happen against Bayern yet, do we? So, but assuming we're still in with a shout in that tie, then I think it will be quite useful to have a break from the league after the FA Cup game, which we probably won't take very seriously anyway. So yeah, looking forward to it.
All right, well, let's jump to the Bayern game then. Our reward for finishing top of our group in what seems like months ago now is is a trip again. Let me start again. Is a tie against Bayern Munich, starting with a trip to Germany on Wednesday, a couple of days' time. Well, what do we think about this? We'll start with Matt here, and let's start coming back to the point you were raising just a second ago about midfield options. Xhaka is available, obviously Oxlade-Chamberlain. What do you think we should be looking at in midfield? What would be your choice?
I would probably go with Xhaka and probably El Neni. I mean, I know Oxlade-Chamberlain's been good, but I feel Bayern probably a step up and one we don't need to risk. If the second leg we're chasing the game or we need goals, then maybe play him there. But I think probably going to need a more solid base than playing Oxlade-Chamberlain.
Yeah, yes, I see what you mean. I'd have real trouble picking. Obviously we don't have all the information. We don't know if there's any injuries or knocks and things like that sort of hanging around. I think I'd certainly have Xhaka involved, but I'm not quite sure how I'd sort of arrange the rest of the team. Pete, any particular thoughts on this one?
Well, I think we might stick with the last outing, Coquelin and who was the partner in the last game?
Well, it was Oxlade-Chamberlain
I think Oxlade-Chamberlain, yes, who has been playing well, and Coquelin hopefully providing the stability. I'm not sure he'll bring back Xhaka after 4 games out. Remember, he wasn't really showing a lot of faith in Xhaka before his sending off and suspension. Although he'd had 2 or 3 games, but before that he hadn't really been in there a lot. We'd sort of been hoping that we might see him and Ramsey a bit more, and hadn't seen too much of it other than the last 2 or 3 games before he got sent off. I think he might stick with the same, pretty much the same formation for that game.
Okay, that's an interesting point. We'll see how that works out on Wednesday. A slightly wider issue then. What do we think is a good result against Munich? Now, Munich are 7 points clear in the Bundesliga. That in itself isn't that unusual. They often seem to be a lot of points clear. But that position is ever so slightly flattered by the fact that Leipzig, everyone's favourite Red Bull team, have recently lost their last 2 games. So that gap has sort of jumped out a bit more than perhaps where it was otherwise. So they've had a slightly, I suppose what I'm getting at is it hasn't been quite the cakewalk for Bayern this year, it seems, than it has been in previous years, although in 20 games they've still only conceded 12 goals. What would be a good? What would you see as a success coming back to London from Munich? I mean, obviously a win, but perhaps a draw, would that be fine? Would a narrow defeat be okay? Matt, any particular things you'd really sort of be delighted if they happened?
I'd be delighted if, for once, we were still in the tie in the second leg. Obviously, it'd be nice to win, but I think if we lost 2-1, I think an away goal is pretty big. If we lost 2-1, then we only need to win 1-0 at the Emirates. I think that'd be great. Obviously, any draw would be good, but I think it's obviously going to be very difficult to score an away goal with their defensive record. But as long as we just keep it solid enough and don't get absolutely mauled and give ourselves a chance when we come back to the Emirates, then I think that's all we can ask for.
Yeah, that sounds a pretty reasonable request of the team. Pete, any?
Yeah, it's really peculiar because we've never done this away leg first thing, have we? And Bayern haven't done the home leg first for 5 years or something. So none of us really know what to do we? I agree with Matt that if we were coming back with a goal or two would be good, whatever the result, just to have some comfort of an away goal and preferably not being hopelessly out of it. So I think anything that isn't more than a one goal defeat that includes us scoring is probably not too bad.
Yeah, it's interesting. Looking back at the last 5 times we've played them, it's actually 2 wins for Arsenal, 2 wins for Bayern, and a draw. Although, of course, the most recent meeting was a 5-1 Bayern win in the group stage last year. 15-16. Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, a draw I'd be, I think, pretty happy with. But a narrow away win, if that was possible, 1-0 or even a 2-1, that would be delightful. I think we could look after that. I just have some slight concerns about this team and the lack of clean sheets that we've been able to sort of string together recently. I have a concern that if we don't come back with a fairly strong position, then it might all go a bit wrong in the home leg, which, as we've, I know me and Pete have discussed this previously, having the home leg second can have that disadvantage when the away team knows exactly what they need to do. And we've been able to use that, well, in theory, we've used that in our opportunities in the past, but it hasn't quite worked out for us. So yeah, I don't know, I'm quite excited about it. I'm quite excited to have European football back. Hopefully for more than 2 more games, but we'll see. All right then, we'll leave that there.
What do we think about Bayern in general? They've got a new assistant manager, Hermann Gerland, I believe is his name, replaced Paul Clement, and he's got a 100% win record, I think.
Oh, well, I was going to say, I don't.
Terrific.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'd have preferred not to know that, to be honest. But, I know that I've read a few bits and pieces about them having that slight rebuilding, and the point I was alluding to earlier, that they haven't quite had that runaway lead in the Bundesliga they've had in previous years. They're also, of course, just coming back off their winter break. I think they've only had 4 games since they had sort of a month off. So there's a lot of unknowns well, not unknowns so much, but variables that we're not quite sure how it's going to work out yet. You hope that our players are going to be okay, but you don't know how it's going to work out, really. Sorry, Pete, you were going to say.
Ancelotti, what's his records like in the Champions League?
Well, he's won it, hasn't he? Several times.
He's won it.
I don't know how many. I believe, I'm going to have to look that up now, but I believe he's not a stranger to the collecting the big cup. I'll have a look. While I'm having a look, let's go from...
obviously, Pep didn't manage it at Bayern, did he?
No, he didn't. No.
And, maybe the more cautious approach that they appear to have under Ancelotti is what they need, which is a bit of a worrying thought.
Well, Ancelotti has won the European Cup twice as a player, and he's won the Champions League when he was managing Madrid. Yeah, he knows his way around the Champions League, so we can't take any comfort from that. Okay, we'll move on then, because after we go away to Bayern, I don't imagine anyone else has ever done these 2 teams in adjacent games. We go to, I think it's called Gander Green Lane, isn't it, where Sutton United play. It's next Monday. Oh, the Borough Sports Ground. Maybe I'm getting my non-league grounds confused. Next Monday, I'm guessing we'll do the next pod after the game, rather than try and squeeze it in before it. So it's the Cup, it's the 5th round, away to Sutton United. Matt, any thoughts on this one? The kind of team we're going to see, the kind of result we would expect? Well, I think we know the result we'd expect, but any thoughts you have on this?
I can only imagine the meltdown if we don't win. In terms of team, oh God, I don't know. I think we need to take it seriously enough and not risk anything. I don't know how keen Ozil and Sanchez will be, but I think we train on a 4G pitch most of the time, so that should be fine. I think it would be nice to see, obviously it depends on how we start against Bayern, but nice to see Lucas and Welbeck get some games. They've been good off the bench, and I think they probably deserve a bit more time. And it probably also gives us a chance to use our midfield options, whether that be get Xhaka back into playing El Neni after he's come back from African Cup of Nations. So I think we have got some options, all of which should enable us to play a strong enough team.
Yeah, I like that idea of I think Lucas and Welbeck do need to play more. I don't know what more Lucas has to do to have the odd start, and hopefully this can be one of those. I think that we'll also have virtually 2 weeks after the game before we have our next game because of that League Cup final getting in the way. So I wonder, and it will depend perhaps what's happened in Munich as to how strong the team is. Pete, thoughts on this particular outing?
Yeah, I think he'll play a similar team to the one he did in the last round against Southampton, and I think we should let them have a replay at Emirates.
Well, that is a thought. I'm not. Yeah, again, that might be near meltdown, to be honest. That might be actual meltdown, but briefly. For those interested, the team against Southampton in that cup game was Ospina in goal, and then Bellerin, Mustafi, Holding, and Gibbs, who was the captain. Maitland-Niles, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Rain Adelaide, and then Walcott, Lucas, and Welbeck. So, yeah, I wouldn't be too disappointed to see the same team, although I might expect a Sanchez or an Ozil perhaps to go in if we've had a bad time against Munich, and this is our sort of one remaining hope of silverware. But we'll have to wait and see how it works out.
Yes, if as you say, if we do get badly beaten in Munich, then the FA Cup becomes even more important, and I'm not going to want to risk anything. So probably we'll know a bit more depending on how we fare in Germany.
We will, and we will. Yeah, that was funny then. The moment when you both sort of paused, and I could hear deep breaths as you were just, I think, both briefly considering the possibility of losing against Sutton. And Matt's still doing it now.
Terrified.
Yeah, it hasn't even occurred to me, but perhaps I should start worrying about it. Okay then, well I think we're sort of done. I'm wondering if I'm looking at the time. We did this last week. I know Matt missed it last week, so perhaps we'll very, very, very briefly mention it. There has been more discussion this week again about Arsene Wenger's future. Ian Wright got involved, and perhaps, well, whether he took something out of context, whether he was completely in context, and the story from Wenger has changed slightly. Matt, we didn't hear your opinions last week, so if someone said to you now Wenger is leaving at the end of this season, what would your thoughts be on that?
It's a strange one, I guess. I've never seen a different manager at Arsenal, so I've obviously got used to him. But I do think, regardless of how this season ends, and obviously I don't think we're going to win the league, Champions League very unlikely, but FA Cup could happen. I think it probably is time for a change. I obviously don't believe in turning up with banners and abusing him and completely ignoring everything he has done for us, but I think there's just a risk if he does sign a contract and the same thing starts to happen again, that the atmosphere becomes so toxic and it just gets worse and worse for him. But we don't know how this season ends. We could go on a Champions League run, and who knows? But I imagine the contract's definitely there for him to sign, and I don't think he'll make a judgment based on what's best for him. I think he generally would want to do what's best for Arsenal, and I think he'll probably only know that once this season's finished. Okay,
that's along the lines, I think, of what Pete was saying last week. I won't get Pete to do it all again because I'll wrap this up. But I dare we'll leave it there for now. But I dare say we'll come back to this further along the season. I wasn't going to mention it this week, but it just happened that this story came out. It had a little bit of mileage in it over the weekend, so I thought it was a chance to catch up with you after you'd missed the opportunity last week. Right, we'll leave it there then. We'll look forward to European and FA Cup action coming up. But for the moment then, thank you very much to Pete.
Thank you, Matt.
And thank you very much to Matt.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much for listening. We will be back with you probably after the Sutton game, so probably next Tuesday. All right, take care, and we'll speak to you then. Bye-bye.